Now, prominent Leave campaigner, former Cabinet Minister Michael Gove, has been elected to sit on a powerful new Brexit Select Committee. He'll join a cross-party committee of MPs which will scrutinise the government as it negotiates Britain's exit from the European Union. The former Justice Secretary has also joined forces with Lord Glassman. He's a Labour peer to come up with a proposal for a new immigration system for Britain. And Michael Gove joins me now. Welcome back.
Hi, lovely to see you, Andrew.
Good to see that you're out of hiding, can I put it that way?
Well, back from holiday, I suppose you could say. But I've been in the pages of the Times over the past couple of
Yes,
weeks.
I see that you are gainfully employed again.
Yes.
Let me...
Back in the private sector.
Give me... mark the government's Brexit performance to date in overall terms. How's it doing?
I think it's doing rather well, actually. I think I'd give it an A, but not yet an A star.
And why not an A star?
Well, I think that there's still more detail that we expect to have fleshed out, but I think it's important to recognise that the Prime Minister has been very clear about the timing of triggering Article 50. She's also spelled out, I think, admirably clearly that we'll take all existing EU law, get it into UK law, and then we can have an opportunity to decide which bits of that we want to amend, which we want to keep, and which we want to ditch. I also think that a great deal of work has gone on behind the scenes, I know, in the new Department for Exiting the European Union and the Department for International Trade. One of the things I'm looking forward to doing with my colleagues on the committee is just probing a bit deeper.
When you launched your campaign to become Tory leader, you said, I will end free movement, introduce an Australian-type point system for immigration to bring the numbers down. The government has ruled out a points-based system for EU migrants. So you're not going to get that?
No, but the Prime Minister has been very clear that migration is going to come down. And it's also the case that the referendum vote was clearly a vote for controlling the numbers who come here. The Australian points-based system is merely one way of achieving that.
Oh, OK. So you wouldn't go to the wall on that?
I think the most important thing is that Parliament should decide. I think there's a principle that Maurice Glassman and I are outlining today, which is that we think you should have a fair migration system which doesn't discriminate between countries. And as you know, at the moment, if you come from Bulgaria, you've got an advantage over someone who comes from Bangladesh, even if you've got skills from Bangladesh and you're an unskilled worker from Bulgaria.
But you know as well as I do that if the government was to meet its target of immigration in the tens of thousands, fewer people from all over the world would have to come to meet that target. Fewer people from outside the EU by a huge number, and fewer people from the EU by a huge number.
Yes, and there are two questions there. The first, of course, is the absolute level, the numbers. The Prime Minister's clear she wants to get it down to tens of thousands. I think the important thing is that whatever the figure, Parliament should decide, not an outside body. The second thing is the basis on which we operate. I think the right thing to do is to have a fair policy that doesn't discriminate.
You also said that the new immigration policy should be based on, quote, the brightest and the best.
Yes.
And most countries, if they're going to take in immigrants, would always want the brightest and the best. But do you accept, in a growing economy, that there is also a need for unskilled migrants? At
certain times, there can be a requirement for unskilled migrants, but as a result of free movement, we've had far too many people with no or low skills coming here, depressing the wages of working people. One of the things that Maurice Glassman and I want to do is to talk to working class communities, because there's been a caricature of the view that many people have on immigration. The caricature is that people want to pull up the drawbridge. They don't. They recognise that migration can benefit the economy, but they do want to see the numbers of low-skilled or unskilled people coming here more firmly controlled.
But if you want the best and the brightest, and you still want an element of unskilled migration, I don't understand how you're ever going to hit net migration of 100,000 if that's still your target. Is it your target?
It's the government's target. One of the reasons for having this commission is now that I'm on the backbenches and I can work with a Labour peer, Maurice, we can ask the public the question, where do they think that figure should be pitched? No.
Well, you fought 2 elections with that in your manifesto.
Absolutely. I was bound by collective responsibility. I didn't strongly disagree with it, but I do think that there was a problem with it. And the problem was that we could not hit that figure while we were in the European Union. And I think that migration certainly has to come down from the current level it's at if people are going to have confidence that in the future, if we need to, that we're making the right decisions about who we let in.
But isn't it clear that even outside the EU, given that the total net migration is about 330,000 and it's split almost even Stevens between EU and non-EU, that even outside the EU you're not going to hit the 100,000. And does it not undermine public confidence in our political elite that you outline targets you know you're not going to meet, as your government didn't meet for 6 years?
Absolutely, I agree with every word of that.
So the government should not have reiterated a 100,000 target?
No, I think that you cannot meet it while we're in the European Union. You could if we're out. The Prime Minister wants to try to hit that target. I think that bringing migration down is a good thing. I also think that it's important that we listen to the public before arriving at what that eventual target should be.
Let's continue in this theme, because you're going to be on this committee that is going to be chaired by Hilary Benn, the Select Committee, and it will scrutinise the work of the government in the Brexit process. Throughout the referendum campaign, you made it clear that vote to leave the European Union was also a vote to leave the single market in terms of membership.
Yes.
Not that you still wouldn't want to have access, but to leave in terms of being a member of the single market. And that also seems clear to me in everything the government has said. Why won't the government, though, admit it? Why doesn't the government admit that we won't be a member of the single market?
I agree with you. I think that I made it clear, the Remain camp made it clear, everybody made it clear that leaving the EU meant leaving the single market. One of the things about the government's negotiating position is that I'm not part of that team. I'm going to be asking those questions. That's one question that I will put to David Davis or any other minister.
Well, I hope you do
when they
better
appear in
than
front of
me,
the
because
committee.
I've asked it again and again and I can't get an answer. Indeed, at one stage, Chris Grayling denied to me on the Sunday Politics that there was such a thing as membership of the single market.
Well, I didn't see that interview, and I can't imagine that I'd be as good an interrogator as you, Andrew, but I will try and get to the bottom of it. To me, it seems clear. And also, folk talk about leaving the single market as though it was some sort of punishment. Actually, it's a liberation. And even in the knowledge that we're, I think, almost inevitably going to leave the single market, we've had this announcement today from Nissan, the best news that Sunderland's had since Paolo Di Canio was sacked.
Who's he?
He was Sunderland's football manager.
Okay.
But,
Sunderland has a football team.
It has a great football team. Okay. But one of the things about that vote of confidence in the North East and in Sunderland is that it's been taken in the full knowledge that we're likely to be outside the single market.
Let me ask you another question on this. Given the government's emphasis on having an ability to do our own free trade deals,
yes,
does it not follow automatically that we cannot remain inside the European Customs Union?
Yes, I think that is I don't have the same degree of 100% certainty. No, 100% certain we need to be outside the single market. I think it's pretty clear that we should be outside the Customs Union as well, yes.
Why doesn't the government guarantee the status of EU citizens already here and their families, of people from the EU who have come here to work, they've brought their families, they could be in the NHS, some of them may be in the Nissan car plant in Sunderland, they're in our fields, they're in our factories, they're helping provide our public services. Why does the government just, instead of making them a bargaining card, just say, if you're here, you're within the law, you and your family are welcome to stay here for as long as you want? Why doesn't the government do that?
Well, I agree with you. That's the first thing to say. And I said so.
No, that's a question. I didn't.
No. I'm just making it clear that I'm not challenging the proposition or disagreeing with the argument. Indeed, I made that case during my brief, ill-fated leadership bid. Why isn't the government saying that? I think the government wants to, as in any negotiation, keep its cards close to its chest. And one of the things that I can do as a backbencher is outline my own views, but I wouldn't want to second-guess every decision that the government is going to have to take during the course of these negotiations before having had more evidence.
People's lives are, it's all very well to say keep the cards close to your chest. People's lives are hanging on this, and it's shameful.
And they have uncertainty. They don't know what they're doing.
No. People who are settled, who've married British subjects or whatever. It just is shameful, Michael.
I absolutely take your point, but
Do you agree with it?
No, I think it's important to dial down the rhetoric on this, but I agree that we should provide that guarantee. During
some of them. The rhetoric gets dialed up because they are really frightened, fed up, angry.
I entirely accept that there are a range of feelings on this issue. All I want to do is to say to the government, when ministers appear in front of the committee, of which I'm lucky enough to have been elected a part, I'll ask those questions as well. But my view is similar to yours. But in fairness to the
I haven't
government,
expressed a view. I simply asked you a question.
My view is similar to the one articulated in the body of your question and put so passionately by
implicit
Margaret.
in the question.
Implicit.
But just let me finally on this point before I move on to one other thing. Isn't it just wrong, almost not just from a practical point of view, but almost the implicit implication in Margaret's question of from a moral position as well? It's wrong to make these people, who are our friends and neighbours and allies in this country, to make them a bargaining card. Why don't we just do it? With whatever the Europeans do to our expats, we can deal with that. Why have these decent, hard-working people been made a bargaining card?
Well, I can only say that I'm in violent agreement with you on this issue, and indeed said so several months ago. But the government's taken a slightly different position. We'll have a chance to cross-examine them in due course.
And when you're on this Brexit committee, one of the ministers who will come before it to be interrogated is Boris Johnson. Are you looking forward to interviewing him?
I always look forward to any encounter with Boris.
So that's a yes.
It's a yes.
When I don't want to go, I hope I get another chance at some stage to go over these amazing events of the summer. I don't want to do that now. I know you've given on other interviews on that and we haven't got time to unpick it. But in general, as you look back, you must have huge regrets, do you not, about the course of action you took in general terms?
Well, I made mistakes, and I hope I've been open in acknowledging that I made mistakes. I can look back at each of the individual decisions that I made, and it seemed to me to be right at the time. But these were mistakes, and I can learn from them. And ultimately, at the end of this process, Theresa May is Prime Minister. I think the Conservative Party made the right choice in that field. Boris Johnson is a senior cabinet minister. I think that his abilities easily entitle him to that job. And I have an opportunity to think right and operate from the backbenches. And I'm enjoying that at the moment.
Do you regard joining the Brexit committee, working with Maurice Glassman, the Labour peer, being on programmes like this? You were on, I think it was The World at One on BBC Radio earlier. You were on Sky with Adam Bolton before you came here. Is this a long march back to re-establishment?
No, it's standing up for the things I believe in. In particular, I played a part, as you were kind enough to acknowledge right at the beginning, in the Leave campaign. And I think there's a responsibility on those of us who played a big part in that campaign to see it through. So I'm not running away from that. I celebrate that decision. I want to make sure that it is implemented properly. And I'm not in government. That gives me the freedom to make arguments to the government and to the country about how it should be done.
I shall watch with interest how you and Maurice go along together, because I can't for the life of me see a more odd couple. Well, it strikes me as really strange.
The Odd Couple was a very successful TV show.
It certainly was. Maybe this is how this will turn.
Do you think you'll make it back to frontline politics again?
I don't know. Okay. It depends. I mean, if Theresa May remains as Prime Minister, I think probably not.
Well, all I want to say is that it's a privilege to work with Maurice. Those of you watching at home who don't know Maurice Glassman, he's one of the smartest, nicest people in politics. He was one of the few Labour politicians who argued that we should leave, and he did so with great clarity.
Like your cheese?
Well, I prefer to think of it as salt and vinegar, which go well together.
Not Marmite and Bovril. No, leave it there. We've done enough. We've done enough on Marmite, I assure you. Michael Gove, thank you for being with us. I hope we get to see you again and chat more on these things.